So we live in a world where we love to label everything. We live in a world where we love to give a label tag. And so we are going to look into the very kind of these labels and tags and analyze them. So first we are going to understand the difference between sex, gender, and sexual orientation. Sex is something defined at the day one the newborn infant is born. Gender is a social role, and sexual orientation is something whom you are attracted to. So on the day one the baby is born, so if the baby is having the very kind of stereotypical male reproductive organ, the baby was labeled as male. On the day one, if the baby is with female reproductive organ, I mean the stereotypical female reproductive organ, the baby is labeled as female. If the baby is born with ambiguous genitals, I mean like unclear genitals, which we cannot fit into the stereotypical heteronormative binary genders, so their reproductive organ may either it may not look like a male reproductive organ nor a female reproductive organ, then the baby is called as intersex baby. So not all intersex conditions are visible at the birth. We believe men are with XY chromosome. So we believe men are with XY chromosome, and we believe women are with XX chromosome. The chromosome of intersex babies may differ from XXX or XYX or XXY. So there are like 14 plus intersex conditions which were recorded so far. So sex is something decided during our birth. You never decided to be born as a male, nor a female, nor intersexed. Whereas gender is a social role which we can choose. It's not about choosing it. It constitutes of psychological attributions, sociological attributions, cultural, etc., etc. So basically, we don't know the difference between sex, gender, and sexual orientation. Gender is it's a role, kind of a social role, whereas sexual orientation is whom we are attracted to. Attraction in the sense, it is like emotional, physical, and romantic, whereas sex is something by birth we define baby as male, female, and intersex. Gender, of course, it's a role. I said it constitutes of sociological attributions, psychological attributions, etc., etc. The most important thing about gender is, in our tradition, before the colonial era, the way we approached the gender is different from the way we approach the notions of gender now in the contemporary society. So, men having long hair or wearing anklets or golden jewels was very common. And gods and goddesses in Hindu traditions have played very gender fluid roles without any guilt. And we believe kitchen is most of the people, especially with a very kind of the patriarchal sense, I can say with them, they believe, of course, even before 30 years, we believed that, some people believed that even before 30 years, some people believed that kitchen is a space for women. But when we go to, resorts or star hotels or somewhere, we cannot, most of the celebrity chefs or the cooks will be the men. So, cooking has nothing to do with being women. And also the very kind of modern notions about, pink is for girls and blue is for boys. And this is how the girl should look, this is how the boy should look. So this is a very kind of, notions which came out of the globalization of gender or out of the colonial mindset, I can say. So, sex identity has something to do with our reproductive system. And gender identity is something which has to do with the brain. And sexual orientation is something which has to do with your heart. So, we know sex is male, female, intersex, and gender is like man, women, and we have the very kind of term called transgender people, which is a post-American feminist movement, the term which arrived, the very kind of term transgender people, the notion which arrived out of the post-feminist rights movements in America. So we have trans men and trans women, and apart from that we have non-binary genders, especially genderqueer people, and in that there are like 58 plus listed gender identities. So sex identity is something 3 by birth, and gender identity is more than 58 plus. And sexual orientation is something which I will talk about, especially we know about heterosexuality. So men loving a woman loving a man. At the same time, bisexuality, women loving men and women equally as their partners. And we have homosexuality, we have asexuality, we have pansexual, polysexual, etc., etc. So sex is something male, female, intersex, that is 3, and gender is something 58 plus, and sexual orientation is more than 15. So this is what we have listed kind of in the modern world. We create a lot of labels and tags. So the most important thing is that I want to focus on gender identities. I want to talk about the indigenous gender minorities. Before 30 years, it was impossible for a trans women, that is a male transitioning to be a female, cannot imitate or replicate a woman. Especially now they can have silicone breast and they can do vaginoplasty, or from cosmetic surgeries to sex reassignment surgery. They don't want to go through the very kind of pain which the indigenous gender minorities went through. So the advancement of the medical science developed a new, opened a new era for the transgender movement, people movement. So when it comes to the indigenous gender minorities, let me start with this. Before Raja Ravi Verma, there were, not many artists gave, they never if you notice the paintings of Raja Ravi Verma, you will see the paintings of the Devis wearing, jackets and all that. Before Ravi Verma, not many painters did that. Even if you visit most of our temples, the sculptures, the breast will be a visible part of women. It was never perceived to be a very kind of erotic part in the human body. I mean, we admired everything, we celebrated everything. So the thing is that the very kind of notion we see the God and goddess and love and the society around us in a very binary notion, we need to analyze that. Even when we look at a puppy on the road, the very first thing we will think is, oh, that is a cute puppy. The very second thing, oh, it is a female or male. So everything, even the gods, Devis, Devas. So we have this thing in Tamil, Thiruvaimoli by Nammalvar, one of the 12 Alvars, who talks about who describes the gender of Perumal, Nammalvar, Analan, Pennalan, Aliyumalan, like that. It's one of the classical literature where he discusses about Lord Vishnu is neither a man, neither a woman, neither an intersexed person. The very kind of notion we need to address is that. And if we look at the kleba, the very kind of word kleba comes from Sudarshana Ramayana. In Sanskrit, kleba means intersex. It also refers to antarlinga hijras and various hijras. The word kli of clean is derived from the word kleba, and it happened to be a powerful bijakshara of Devi. So there is a reference to the story of King Sudarshana celebrate Bashantana Bhratri. King Sudarshana's descendants were considered to be Sri Rama. So, and also in Tirumandiram, Tirumular records the relationship between Lord Shiva and intersex people. How such babies were born. Especially in ancient Tamil Sangam literature, it uses the word pedi to refer to the people born with intersex condition. It also refers to antarlinga hijras and various other hijras. Intersex people are popularly known as Mabedi Husilis in hijra community. But the identity of intersex people always remind us distinct identity from popular hijra community. So the so-called geographical locations which we refer as present and past India, from some parts of Afghanistan to some parts of the Southeast and South Asia. And in this region, in the northern belt, there evolved an indigenous gender minority tradition. There are gender-specific rituals. They originated a specific social stratification, a language, a religion, a philosophy, and a tradition which is simply based on gender identity. So any culture in the world will be originating either on the basis of a religion or language. So here, in the so-called geographical traditions which we refer as, the geographical locations which we refer as past India, past Bharat. In the past Bharat, we had a lot of indigenous gender minorities. For example, let me come from the down, from Kanyakumari to top. So people of Tamil Nadu had Aravan worship, and people of Kerala have Bhagavati worship and Ayyappa worship. So Aravan and Aravan worship is specific to indigenous gender minorities called Arvanis, who are part of the transgender umbrella. And we have Ellamma worship in Andhra Pradesh, and in between, if you see Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, we have Jogappas, and we have Mangalmukhi worship in Konkan region of, especially Goa and places around Goa. And we have a huge community called Hijra community, who particularly worship Mahakaleshwar. And so these people are known as Sakhi Bekis in Utkal region, especially in Bengal region, and Nupi Manbis in northeast, and Napumsakas in Burma and some parts of Southeast Asia. And there was Tara worship near to the belt of Nepal and Tibet. And there is southern Khadi tribal worship which happened on the the laps of Himalayas. And we have Shantoshi Mata's worship, and when you go up to Kashmir, we have Vaishnavi Devi worship. So these people worship Rama in Uttar Pradesh, and Kinnars from the Madhya Pradesh and the middle region, and especially Bachura Mata worship in Gujarat. So they have their own tradition, they have their own names, they have their peculiar language. So the language which they speak from, some parts of Afghanistan, Pakistan to Maharashtra to the most of the northern belt of India is known as Hijra Farsi. It's an indigenous gender minority dialect, a mix of native regional language and Hindustani with Persian, Sindhi, Punjabi, etc. Spoken in the northern belt of India, Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the language which this community speak in south is known as Khauti Bhasha. A mix of Tamil, Sanskrit, Urdu, regional languages is spoken by the indigenous gender minority communities in Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa and some parts of Tamil Nadu. They even have sign languages and typical mannerisms to communicate. The peculiar clap is one such. These people, the very kind of modern word we use to refer the LGBTQIA community as whole, as queer community, were known as the people who never fall under the Varnashrama Dharma. Varnashrama Dharma in the sense like they were considered to be the protectors of the indigenous spiritual traditions of India. So the most important thing is that these indigenous gender minorities of Bharat Jnana Rajya, at the time there was no America. At the time, there were red Indians. So throughout the world, if you see the indigenous gender minorities, they venerate and celebrate the divine feminine. Snake and cow were always considered to be the symbols of divine femininity. So in indigenous traditions, they venerate their selfless ancestors. They worship the nature as mother, and as well as venerate the natural elements. And the most important thing for them is they treat or consider God as a female. I mean, like, for them, more than the female, it's like the mother worship was integral part of their traditions. So it's like the most important thing is that if we see the indigenous gender minorities throughout the globe, the most important thing for them is that they always accommodated this gender fluidity, and they were like okay with this. But when the colonial notions came up with, they were not comfortable with that. Texts from post, especially from the Abrahamic traditions, texts from the post New Testament, post Old Testament. When it comes to Abrahamic traditions, texts from the post Old Testament see all this matter as a kind of, unnatural and not okay. When it comes to the indigenous gender minorities, before post Old Testament texts, they were not condemning it, neither recognized it, but most of the 98% of the indigenous traditions around the globe recognized it. It was part of their tradition and culture. When it comes to the Native Americans, apart from the binary gender identities, they have trigender, they have bigender identity, etc., etc. They have gender fluid families where the person who don't believe in the binary genders raise their children beyond gender identities. So why we need to understand these indigenous gender minorities, or these indigenous gender minorities, as I said, have a specific tradition and culture which is based on the dharmic values, Slowly, these narrations are changing, and there are very less people working on the sphere to protect the dharmic values of these indigenous gender minorities. Especially coming back, we talk a lot about transgender rights, but we don't know who are transgender people. And we believe all transgender people are hijras, or hijras fall under transgender umbrella, and they are one of the community among the indigenous gender minority communities, but not all transgender people are hijras. The hijra community, which is a subsect of the transgender community, operates their communities that are divided into Jamaat. So I want to talk about the very kind of dark side in this community, but before going to that, the very kind of beautiful stories with these indigenous gender minority community, if you see, in the, like they are considered to be the protectors of the spiritual traditions here in our dharmic values. So from Rama to Krishna, so most of the avatars which happened kind of gave a space to them, or they themselves played a role of this. So the one important thing is that when we worship the supreme, whether it is supreme Brahman or Krishna or Vishnu or Shiva or any sacred traditional philosophies which originated from our Bharatvarsha, it never kind of like so specific about the role, the gender role. It's all about, they never bothered about it is men or women or anything. It's all about attaining the supreme wisdom. So their history, the history of these indigenous gender minorities trace back before 3,500 to 4,000 plus years, even before Buddha and before the Jain traditions. So it's quite like old. But what happened after the 16th century for these indigenous gender minorities are very sad. The entire community was destabilized, and the very kind of values what they were following were kind of shattered, and these different indigenous gender minority communities, especially Hijra community, they have something called Jamaat system, where the individual trans person, upon realizing their transgender identities, may escape from their unsupportive families and be taken under the wing of a transgender person, that is a Hijra, a male who transitioned as the female. Here they are often compelled into beggary and sex work. So when you see most of the transgender people, I mean like Hijras who beg and do sex work, you think that the society is discriminating them. But the other side of that, the unknown side of that is that the community itself pulled its own people down in such manner. Of course, we do need change in our approach, in the way we look at these people in the society. But before that, there are a lot of reformation need to be done within the community. We have rescued few trans, especially Hijras, from forced sex work and begging. This particular girl who, the trans woman, I mean the Hijra, who ran from Madurai to Bangalore to become a Hijra, she joined in this Jamaat system where she need to pay tax to the Nayak. The average tax they should pay is more than 2.5 lakhs, like that. So to have that money, they need to go for begging. Once they collect the money through begging, the Nayak approves their sex reassignment surgery. And the supreme leader, when she approves, I mean the tax collector, the Nayak, the Hijra, when she approves this sex reassignment surgery, then the doctor goes on performing it. But before 30 years, the system was different. Of course, they need to give the money, but they used aksha blade, they used very sharp blades, and even the kind of shoots of the palm shoots to castrate by fixing a particular star date, and as well as and time. In the middle of the night, they do this procedures, and the person who performed these rituals are known as the priestess is known as Tayamma among them. But now, because of the advancement of medical sciences, they undergo sex reassignment surgery. The very first state to come up with the free sex reassignment surgeries for trans women is Tamil Nadu. And there are like few states now offering these surgeries, but the medical ethics of these surgeries need to be questioned. The way they handle these people and the way follow. But more than that, the shocking thing is that this particular girl whom we rescued from forced sex work was, she begged, this trans woman begged and handed over the money to the Nayak. And the Nayak was like, okay, now you can go and, undergo nirvana. They call this procedure as nirvana. Even within this indigenous gender minority communities, they consider being born as women or living as women is something supreme. So these people always respected that. This girl was like resisting that after the sex reassignment surgery of this particular girl. After 1 year, after the wounds got healed, when she imitated a biological cis women, the Nayak, the supreme leader, told her that, now, like you don't want to do begging, you do sex work like that. So they have their own brothels running in their hammam. So this girl was like forced to do that. When she, said no, she was like raped by more than 6 men. And she contacted the helpline of Srishti, and some way she escaped and she reached us. So we need a system. Even if she is raped, if she is going to police station, very rarely complaints or registered. There is no provision for them. Irrespective of the constitution is, not gender specific. Like most of the European countries or developed nations, their constitutions, most of the constitutions in the world are gender specific. But thank God, thanks to Baba Saheb Ambedkar, of course, Baba Saheb become most of the people just use him as a symbol, not only in various activisms, but also in the gender minority activism. So, the Hijra community, which is a subsect of the transgender community, operates the community which are divided into different jamaats. Each area will have at least 4 or 3, the Nayaks. At least each district will have at least 3 Nayaks. So, in this Jamaat system, where individuals, upon realizing their transgender identities, may escape their unsupportive families and be taken under the wing of the transgender Hijra Nayak, here they are often compelled into beggary and sex work. And if the Guru approves their sex reassignment surgery, the individual must do the Guru bidding, that is beggary, murcha, sex work, until he or she repays the debt. So these Nayaks have strong social networks among themselves, and every Jamaat has its own specific rituals. The story of trans women rescued from forced sex work from Madurai, after a continuous struggle with her identity, this person ran away from her home and somehow was compelled to forced into sex work and begging in Bengaluru. But she refused to do so. But did she really have a choice? The question is no. Now you must ask, who will pay to have sex with these transgender people? The truth is, men just need flesh. There are imams who visit these girls. They tie their beards up and do not touch the girls' bodies, as they penetrate because they consider it haram to touch their bodies. These Nayaks are very powerful people, both socially and financially. They have large networks and even fund some political individuals to ensure their safety. And there is a girl named Anusha. To save herself, she's a Hijra, she was a Hijra. To save herself, she fled from the Jamaat in Visakhapatnam, and somehow she ended up in Mumbai. This is when well-known transgender activists spotted her and called her Nayak, the Anusha's Nayak, and told her, your girl is here in Mumbai, come and fetch her, like that she told. You know what happened next will give you, it's like shocking that the girl, after being caught, was burned to death. So this is 21st century. We individuals should be paying our taxes to the government, not to some Nayaks. As I say, the traditions and the indigenous rituals and the dharmic values of this community need to be protected. The superstition within this community need to be questioned too. So the details of Gori slavery system that is being practiced in this community for past 600 plus years, because of the Mughals and colonial influence, especially this was not the system for sure before 1,000 years or so including Arundhati Roy, to a lot of scholars misinterpret the Hijra community people as intersex people. Intersex people may sometimes identify themselves as trans women or trans men. Of course, they have a very distinct identity within the Hijra community. So they cannot be just homogenized as intersex people or Hijra people.